Hello, my name is host Eric, host Talking with Famous People, and I'm here with famous person Eric, who recommended a topic of meta-rationality. He also sent me a link, which I will click here, but I found another one, my own link to it as well, so we can look at that first. Here we go. Meta-Rationality. Nobel laureate, Princeton economics professor, and New York Times columnist Paul Krugman is a brilliant man. I am not so brilliant. So when Krugman makes strident claims about macroeconomics, a complex subject on which he has significantly more expertise than I, should I just accept them? How should we evaluate the claims of people much smarter than ourselves? A starting point for thinking about this question is the words of another Nobelist, Robert Aumann. In 1976, Aumann showed that under certain strong assumptions, disagreement on questions of facts is irrational. Suppose that Krugman and I have read all the same papers about macroeconomics, and we have access to all the same macroeconomic data. Suppose further that we agree that Krugman is smarter than I am. All it should take, according to Aumann, is for our beliefs to converge, is for us to exchange our views. If we have common priors, we are mutually aware of each other's views. Then, if we do not agree, ex post, at least one of us is being irrational. It seems natural to conclude, given these facts, that if Krugman and I disagree, the fault lies with me. After all, he is much smarter than I am. So shouldn't I converge much more to his view than he does to mine? Not necessarily. One problem is that if I change my belief to match Krugman's, I would still disagree with a lot of really smart people, including many people as smart and possibly even smarter than Krugman. These people have read the same macroeconomics literature that Krugman and I have, and they have access to the same data. So the fact that they all disagree with each other on some margin suggests that very few of them behave according to the theory of disagreement. There must be some systemic problem with the beliefs of macroeconomists. In their paper on disagreement, Tyler Cowen and Robin Hanson grapple with the problem of self-deception. Self-favoring priors, they note, can help serve other functions besides arriving at the truth. People who irrationally believe in themselves are often more successful than those who do not, because pursuit of the truth is often irrelevant in evolutionary competition. Humans have an evolved tendency to hold self-favoring priors and self-deceive about the existence of these priors in ourselves, even though we frequently observe them in others. Self-deception is in some ways a more serious problem than mere lack of intelligence. It is embarrassing to be caught in a logical contradiction, as a stupid person might be, because it is often impossible to deny. But when accused of disagreeing due to self-favoring prior, such as having an inflated opinion of one's own judgment, people can and do simply deny the accusation. How can we best cope with the problem of self-deception? Cohen and Hanson argue that we should be on the lookout for people who are meta-rational, honest truth seekers who choose opinions as if they understand the problem of disagreement and self-deception. According to the theory of disagreement, meta-rational people will not have disagreements among themselves, caused by faith in their own superior knowledge or reasoning ability. The fact that disagreement remains widespread suggests that most people are not meta-rational, or it seems less likely that meta-rational people cannot distinguish one another. Taylor and I don't ever need to disagree with each other. We won't have disagreements because, or if we might disagree, but we won't have a disagreement because one of us will be right or wrong, or will identify the source of the dispute. It's like, the reason we won't persist in it is because he and I would be able to narrow it down to the actual single point that's in dispute, and we'd be able to determine how we're going to figure out which person's right about it. We wouldn't engage in the endless battling for position, because we're not battling for positions. We are understanding the nature of disagreement and of self-deception. And, that's what I'm always hammering on about, which is that if you're gonna advocate for use of coercive control mechanisms, be honest about it. Say, okay, I'm going to advocate in favor of this use of violence for this reason, and here's why it yada yada. All this seems obvious to me, it says here. No, it says here also, how can we best cope with the problem I already read the paragraph. According to the theory, honest truth seekers who choose opinions as if they understand the problem of disagreement and self-deception. According to the theory of disagreement, meta-rational people will not themselves have disagreements. The fact that disagreement remains widespread suggests that most people are not meta-rational, or what seems less likely, that meta-rational people cannot distinguish one another. We can try to identify meta-rational people through their cognitive and conversational styles. Someone who is really seeking the truth should be eager to collect new information through listening rather than speaking, construe opposing perspectives in their most favorable light, and offer information of which the other parties are not aware, instead of simply repeating arguments the other side has already heard. Now, you might argue that I'm not eager to collect new information through listening. That might be a fair critique of me. But I certainly am willing to construe opposing perspectives in their most favorable light. I'm always willing to argue the other side, and argue it as best as it can possibly be argued. Because otherwise, there's no challenge, right? You don't want to knock over straw men. Certainly, I'm consistently encountering people who are hearing new arguments from me because they're still trying to answer arguments I'm not even making a lot of times. This guy says, all this seems obvious to me, but it's discussed much too rarely. Maybe we can figure out ways to encourage this virtue that Cohen and Hansen call meta-rationality. There are already too many mechanisms that reward people for aggressively arguing for fixed positions. If Krugman really were meta-rational, he might still have his Nobel Prize, but he wouldn't be a popular newspaper columnist. The Azimuth Project and this blog are already doing a lot of things to prevent people from getting locked into fixed positions and filtering out evidence that goes against their views. Most crucial seems to be the policy of forbidding insults, bullying, and overly repetitive restatement of the same views. What? No. No, that's not right. The point is to... See, this is fucked up because they don't understand that if you think heat matters, you still don't get it quite, right? If you think heat matters, you don't quite get it. Because it's about the mechanisms, and that's not a mechanism. Although it might be something that interferes with the mechanism on occasion, it might also be something that supplements the mechanism on occasion. So no. Well, he says, heat attracts many people, so I'm sure we could get a lot more people to read this blog by turning up the heat. A little heat is a good thing because it engages people's energy, but heat also makes it harder for people to change their minds. When the heat gets too high, changing one's mind is perceived as a defeat to be avoided at all costs. Even worse, people form tribes who back each other up in every argument, regardless of topic. Okay, no, you see, you just went from a truth to a falsehood and pretended they were connected. Changing one's mind is perceived to be as a defeat to be avoided at all costs. Well, being proven wrong, you're worried about other people's mental processes. You can't know that, right? You can't know other people's mental processes. What you can worry about is you can make wrongness painful. And it may or may not change their minds, but it'll dissuade them from using inadequate argumentation. Dorita talks about the ways to identify meta-rational people. This is very attractive. I think it's better to talk about identifying when people are behaving meta-rationally. I agree with this individual right here. Exactly. That's true. Absolutely. I don't think we should spend too much of our time looking around for paragons of meta-rationality. First of all, nobody's perfect. True. Second of all, as soon as somebody gets a big reputation for rationality, meta-rationality, or another virtue, it seems they develop a fan club that runs up this risk of turning into a cult. This often makes it harder rather than easier for people to think clearly and change their minds. Well, it depends on the nature of the Meta-Rationalist, frankly. I mean, one of the natures of Meta-Rationalism is that it is basically immune to cultism, I would think. I'd rather look for customs and institutions that encourage meta-rationality. Well, I mean, I wouldn't trust... First of all, you're making a reification fallacy when you say institutions or customs... Well, customs maybe, but institutions no. How can we encourage rationality and meta-rationality and make it more popular? You don't encourage them. All right, so, okay, the gist of this is correct. The meaning, the interpretive stuff this guy's going through is, I don't like it. I think it's mush, and I don't like it. But the point is, he's right, it is. A general assessment that meta-rationality is the road to correctness. So, meta-rationality is a good term I've never heard it before tonight. and it explains what my position is. When people want to know, are you a moral absolutist, Eric? I have an answer now. I'm a meta-rationalist. My position is what I've always been saying it is. Now I have a term for it, which is we honestly execute the mechanisms we all know and have at our disposal. We make an earnest effort to actually understand those mechanisms, namely the mechanisms of argumentation, and we determine our positions through the mechanism of argumentation, not use the mechanism of argumentation to advocate our positions first and foremost. We want to go in knowing that we don't have a position really. We have a position for the moment, barring any new information or better approaches or more logically sound approaches. And so, do we need meta-rationality as the primary driving political force of the country? Of course we do. Some people would say, well, Eric, you're incredibly attached to your positions. You are a hardcore libertarian, natural rights, negative rights kind of guy. I'd say pending reasons to prefer another framework, and that framework only in certain logical contexts where it makes sense. Public policy. I'm not all about a negative rights framework in a relationship. I don't think that it's unreasonable to think that a significant other might be able to make a positive claim upon you that's not contractual. Of course, it's sort of mushily emotion contractual. So, I mean, that's the thing. At the end of the day, we always need to distinguish between the framework of the thing in which we're arguing. Are we talking about public policy? If we are, then you're subject to a lot more scrutiny in my book than if you're talking about something else. Because that's where you're saying this is what we should force everybody to do. Let's see what Eric says here. In the Chizat. If you want to go Chizat, then you've got to go in the Chizat. Oh, well, I didn't read your thing. When I tried to launch it, it said... I will look at it, though. It says, Chrome is unresponsive. Do you want to relaunch? Fine, I will relaunch. It's basically saying rationals operating with TI or TE should adhere to intuitiveness, but it fails to consider the intuitive rationals with NI or NE. Well, maybe it's saying the INTPs should be more like ENTPs. I don't know, I'll look at it right now if it relaunches successfully. See, I can't copy this. Oh wait, there's copying maybe. Copy. Meaningness.com/metablog. Let me turn this off. This is going to help. Is it a bridge to meta-rationality versus civilization collapse? To prevent... Is that the one you want me to read? The civilizational collapse one? Because I can't click the link directly. Oh, well, it sounds like he left anyway. We are not adequately teaching young adults how to be rational, systemic, or modern. That is true, for sure. But not young adults. We're not teaching young children how to do that. I have a video that I was going to upload, but I didn't. It's not a very good video, really, but it's me teaching the nature of wealth and labor and taxation to 5th graders. Nobody else is teaching them that. Let's see, stages of adult development. The transition between the rational and meta-rational stages is particularly difficult. No bridge has yet been built. This is an unrecognized lack and has an opportunity to contribute. It has perhaps never been seriously attempted, so it may be unexpectedly easy. It is. I've got it right here. This is it. This is the fucking bridge right here, talking with famous people. With rationality seeming the only basis for meaning, they fall into nihilistic depression. Between stages 4 and 5, there is a gap, a stretch of open ocean. One recognizes the limitations of rationality, but can't yet work effectively in the meta-rational mode. Many people get stuck treading water here, trying to stay afloat, often not even able to see dry land and meta-rationality on the horizon. With rationality seeming the only basis for meaning, they fall into nihilistic depression. Theirs is sometimes called stage 4.5, although it is not a stage in the same sense as the others. It's not a workable organizational mode. However, its dysfunction is stabilized by spurious logic of nihilism. Some stuck there may be barely capable of everyday function. Others manage better by recognizing the limits of rationality while continuing to use it effectively in practice. Stages of individual development are manifest also in forms of social organization. Pre-rational psychology is typical of pre-modern societies. Rationality's characteristics to postmodernity corresponds. Yeah, this is fucking so right on the money. I've never encountered anything so right on the goddamn money. Postmodernism sabotages the bridge to rational. Yeah, from meta-rationality to rationality. Of course it does. In the 1970s and 80s, the best postmodern pro-structural thinkers presented meta-rational views based on their thorough understanding of systemic rationality. The first generation of postmodern teachers had a complete classical education in the humanities. They mastered to understand the limitations. Deconstructed postmodernism, the critique at stage 4, is the basis of contemporary university humanities curriculum. This is a disaster. The critique is largely correct, but as Keegan observed, to teach it to young adults is harmful. Few university students have consolidated rationality. Essentially, none are ready to move beyond it. Pointing out its defects makes their developmental task more difficult. You cannot understand what is wrong with rationality until you're capable of being rational. You cannot go beyond rationality until you can use it reliably. You cannot become meta to systems you do not appreciate and do not understand how to deploy. You cannot move from stage 3 to stage 5 without passing through stage 4. In fact, even most teachers of postmodern theory don't understand it. Fucking so true. Unfortunately, the postmodern pioneers chose to write in obfuscatory riddles. Their insights were difficult enough to understand without that. Few followers extract that insights. Most teachers are second-generation professors who don't understand POMO when it was new, third-generation ones who were mainly taught dumbed-down second-generation pseudo-POMO. They were never taught to think and can't. What they learned was to imitate the founders' appalling rhetorical style. They even learned to not think because thinking would lead to questioning the nonsense, which would get you ejected from POMO-dom. Consequently, most contemporary POMO writing is, as everyone admits, incoherent blather, full of sound and fury signifying nothing. That's pseudo-POMO. At this point, many humanities professors cannot take even a rational stage 4 stance. They were not taught to think. Lacking that, they cannot critique rationality accurately. They could not possibly transmit stage 5 meta-rationality to their students now. So, still worse, pseudo-POMO misunderstands the postmodern critique simply as all systems are wicked, false ideologies invented by the powerful as means of oppression and must be destroyed. Unfortunately, critical theory has so far failed to produce a broad, positive, clear, and practical meta-rational vision. Thank you! Thank you! With nothing to... how come I had no idea that somebody else had figured all this shit out already? And this is much more clear than my understanding of it. It's got stages and everything. Confirming the accuracy of the critique opens possibility a third alternative stage 3 and 4 worldviews. Okay, so building a bridge stage 5 may be critical to keeping the bridge stage 4 open. Because the postmodern critique is correct, it's intellectually indefensible to insist on rationality as the way and the truth and the light. To make stage 4 palatable, it has to be clear that it is not the final destination. Confirming the accuracy of the critique opens the possibility of a third alternative to the Stage 3 and Stage 4 worldviews. Saying you are right, systems are not ultimately workable as the basis for society and culture, and you are right, systems do always get appropriated by the powerful as a means of oppression, makes credible, psychologically understanding rational systems is a stage you need to go through to get beyond them, and, however imperfect, systems are the main way we currently know how to deliver the material and social prerequisites for life, so we have to keep them running for now. I mean, excellent, brilliant, perfect. Misperception of woo blocks the bridge beyond rationality. STEM education teaches the value of technical systems, including formal rationality. STEM education ignores postmodernism, so the bridge Stage 4 is still intact there. Thus, Stage 5 meta-rationality is now probably more accessible for STEM folks than for other people. I think it's important to present Stage 5 in language STEM folks can understand and will find attractive. For people in Stage 4, anything that is not rational may sound like simple irrationality or magical thinking, and so they are likely to reject it. As a further difficulty, Stage 5 has some specific commonalities with Stage 3, making it harder to distinguish. Dualism, insistence on precise boundaries, is characteristic of Stage 4. Monism, rejection of boundaries, and overemphasis on connections is characteristic of Stage 3. Stage 5 recognizes the boundaries and connections are both nebulous and patterned, so it is neither monist nor dualist. However, from a rationalist point of view, meta-rationalism's rejection of black and white thinking looks just like blooming, buzzing confusion of Stage 3 monism, which it is right to reject. Well, it's because you're describing it badly, is why. That's not what it is. It's not neither monist nor dualist. That's not the point. That's not the point of it. The point isn't that it's monist or dualist. It's that it is a meta framework that provides an adjudicatory mechanism for evaluating conflicts that are structural, like conflicts between boundaries and connections, and conflicts that are non-structural, but that doesn't make it neither monist nor dualist. It makes it flexibly either as per needed. Okay, so to say that it's not one of those is to neglect to remember that bridge to Stage 4 has to always be kept open. If you want to try to reduce it to mush, then you can do that. But see, I can tell what's going to happen here. I get a feeling I know what's going to happen. Don't tell me he did it. Now, this is good, though. This is really good right here. Stages 3 and 5 both tolerate contradictions, but of different types and in different ways. Stage 3 does not feel a need for rational justifications and mostly doesn't have the capacity to use them. So it mostly doesn't even notice logical contradictions and isn't bothered by them when it does. However, Stage 3 can be highly intolerant of contradictory value judgments because they threaten community harmony. Stage 4 finds contradictions within its system a fundamental problem and tries to eliminate them one way or another. Eventually, if contradictions cannot be eliminated from the system, it must be replaced. Stage 4 wants to find the right system, and if 2 can contradict, then it shows 1 is wrong. Stage 5 recognizes the value of sorting out contradictions within a system and retains Stage 4's ability to do so. However, it doesn't expect any system to work perfectly, so it tolerates internal contradictions if they appear relatively unproblematic. Stage 5 entertains multiple systems and is comfortable with contradictions between them because systems are not absolute truths, only ways of seeing that are useful in different circumstances. Stage 5 is uniquely comfortable with value conflicts since, unlike both 3 and 4, it does not take any value as ultimate. Well, I mean, it does, right? It takes meta-rationality's value as ultimate. So don't try to... If meta-rationality wants to get out of the box of it, then I understand why it doesn't want to declare itself a value, but it obviously and clearly is. So let's not go too far, right? People in Stage 3 tend to misunderstand Stage 4 as being Stage 2 and hint at the possibility of a similar error at Stage 4. And 3 and 5 both tolerate contradictions. I myself got hung up on the superficial similarity for multiple years. I think that it's not just a coincidence, but a reason for why we can make a reliable distinction between these stages in the first place. If you view cognitive development as a river that settles in sections where progress lies in a direction that looks backwards, create a sort of reservoir. Basically, their progress is counterintuitive, so people slow down a lot and pile up. These then can more easily recognized as separate stages compared to a continuing flowing river. Lacking a clear presentation of Stage 5 and a particularly clear explanation of how things differ from Stage 3, it is inaccessible from Stage 4 directly. At best, one can only reach Stage 4.5, the gap of nihilistic despair. This generally provokes anxiety, rage, and depression, and is not a good place to get stuck. And little or no support is available for the 4.5 to 5 transition. Mostly, you can only get Stage 5 through a rare combination of luck, intelligence, and endurance, or be such a drunk that you have to make drastic revolutionary change, right? Then you get introduced to the notion of using these things that you have dismissed and accepting the possibility that you could actually treat it as behavior, and then all of a sudden you're free. But he's right. It's not easy to get free from rationalism because, I mean, any attempt to do so would be subject to the critiques of rationalism itself, and I'm saying actually this person's depiction of meta-rationality is flawed because they don't understand that in fact the meta-rational position does tolerate contradictions and stuff, but you know, if you have a proper meta framework, they don't actually end up being contradictory. And necessarily, if in fact meta-rationality is the highest form of rationality, then obviously it's rational to embrace it over some alternative. So you can't get out of the box, meta-rationalists. We can't get out of the box. We have the mechanism of meta-rationality, which is to prioritize arguing correctly. It's just that. I mean, everybody's arguing. Nobody can ever tell me that they're not arguing if we're talking about something meaningfully. If there's anything that could be disputed, you're arguing. Most of the time, we both argue the same side. Like, let's go to the store. Yeah, let's go to the store. I'm not arguing. JC says, ha ha ha. I agree, JC, you're not arguing. Ha ha ha. So yeah, we're both arguing the same side. The side that says that you're not arguing. But I could argue with that. I could say, in fact, I am sort of arguing with that. I'm saying, yes, you are arguing. You're arguing that you're not arguing. So, the point being, the mechanism's in place. We know that it ought to be applied in its most technical and mechanical sense, with the logic as the predominant force in certain contexts, not so much in other contexts, that there are other factors to consider, for sure, and that we need to be willing to and able to compromise and move away from a systemic approach, like, for example, negative rights. However, my point is we need to do that in an orderly fashion. So we start there because it's the only thing that we can all agree on, and all basically do agree on already. Although we don't agree that it should be used as a metric for anything, we all agree that we ought not transgress upon other people and they ought not transgress upon us. So, I mean, the thing is, meta-rationality would say, Eric, to the extent that you're ascribing to a specific position, you can't be a meta-rationalist. But of course, my point is, you're not actually a meta-rationalist unless you're ascribing to specific positions. You don't want to get stuck in relativism. And the absolutism that you're going to advocate is going to be one that is an absolutism that's a means-based absolutism, which says use the mechanisms of argumentation fairly, honestly, and you'll get to the truth. And if, in fact, an argument, mine or anybody else's, can't withstand a certain amount of attack, then it doesn't deserve to be considered as the argument we settle on, the position statement we settle on. So anyway, that brings this video to a close. I'm really glad Eric showed me this thing on meta-rationality. I didn't know that word existed, and I didn't know that thing existed at all. I agree with it by and large completely. I think it's right on the money, except, of course, it gets stuck in what I would call skepticism light. Just because you're meta-rational doesn't mean you can't ascribe to a position. You just have to ascribe to it conditionally. And, in fact, you have to ascribe to it if you want to be truly meta-rational. Because to try to deny the individual's moral responsibility to take positions on things that matter to him is ridiculous and not conducive to good thinking. And I don't think anybody's really saying that. I'm just saying, it's easy enough to misinterpret that thing and to fall into mush. You gotta be careful with it. And I agree with what he's saying, like, don't ascribe anybody title of Meta-Rationalist, though I'm describing it to myself, because if you make it a thing, then it's like karate, like black belt. Oh, you got a black belt. He's only level 4.5. He's stuck in nihilism. I don't like that shit. I mean, I like the levels for a taxonomy perspective, but I don't like the notion that that everybody's got to proceed through this given path. And I mean, taught plenty of little kids debate and watched them shoot right into, I'd say, I watched Kelly, right? She's a super good elite debater. I watched her go through the rationality phase. I watched Delilah go through it as well, where they became actively interested in feminism, and they weren't really thinking about it. Delilah got out of it. She sort of saw the limits of it. I don't know if she's meta-rational yet or not, but I would claim that that meta-rationality is not at all the same thing as relativism. And it's a big mistake to think it is. To the extent that these people would identify the two things as similar, I would dispute that 100%. That's why I'm saying don't do that thing that they were talking about at the end where it sort of slides into mush. We know what the actual mechanism is. It's called argumentation. It's the same thing everybody who's talking about anything is doing all the time. We have all the tools in place. We don't need to sort of find out what's going to happen, Anyway, thanks for watching Talking with Famous People. And no fuego, consumo de queso.